We're going to go over number 1313, decompressed run-length encoded list. The question says, we are given a list of numbers of integers representing a list compressed with run-length encoding. So we have a list of numbers which is composed of integers. Consider each adjacent pair, adjacent meaning they're next to each other, of elements A and B, they're next to each other, in the form of this, with I is greater than or equal to 0. And for each such pair, there are elements with a value B in the decompressed list. Okay, let's look at our example. We have an input of nums array, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. And output, we have 2, 4, 4, 4. So the first pair that we have is 1 and 2, right? And this is the pair, adjacent pair that the question says over here, A and B. And this is pretty much equal to nums at index I times 2, comma, and nums at index I times 2 plus 1. Alright, so the first number that we have, this is going to be frequency, and frequency is how many times the number occurs, and this number 2 is the value, right? Value. So what this is saying is that number 2 is going to occur only once. So for our result, for the first loop, we're going to have 2 in our array because 2 happened once. So frequency is how many times the number occurs. And this is our first loop. And in the second loop, our numbers are 3 and 4, right? Remember, this is frequency, and this is the value. So 4 happens how many times? 3. So that's 4, 4, and 4, right? And we're done with our loop. And we want to combine these two results. And finally, what we're going to get is 2, 4, 4, and 4. And if you look at our output, that's what we get over here. Okay guys, so let's code our solutions. First thing we do, always declare our function, which takes in one parameter, which is a numbers array. And next we're gonna do is, we're gonna just create a variable named result, which is going to store our result, and that's an array. And we want to loop through our array, right? So we want to use our for loop. And we're gonna start at index 0, loop through our array. And this time we're going to increment the I by 2 and not by 1. And I'll explain why later. And I'm just gonna make a variable, let frequency is equal to nums at index I. And I'm just gonna make a variable named val, and it's going to be nums at index I plus 1, okay? And what we're going to do again is we're going to make another for loop for that I is equal to 0 and I is less than frequency and I plus plus, and we're going to push in the value, and then finally we're going to return our result. Okay, there's an error somewhere. Okay, so in the first loop we go through our array and we increment the we increment I by 2 because if you go back to our example, we want the adjacent pairs, right? And we don't want to reuse the same numbers again. So for the first pair we're gonna use 1 and 2, and the next pair we're not gonna use 2 and 3 because we already used 2. We're going to use 3 and 4. That's why we increment I by 2, and we just made a variable for frequency and value. And remember that if you look at the problem, frequency comes first and then value is next. The reason why we're using for loop here is because we want to push in whatever the value is into our results array, how many times, for the number of times the frequency happens or is. So if frequency was 2, we want to push in value twice. That's why we use the second loop. And if we run our result, we get our solution. It's 2, 4, 4, and 4, and that's what we get. That's the output. Okay, let's go over our code one more time. So first thing we do is declare our function, which takes in one parameter, which is an array, and we're going to make a result variable, which is an empty array, and we're going to return that when our for loop is done. And now we have a nested for loop, and the first for loop is going to basically get the numbers for our frequency and value. And this is important here. We increase the I by 2 because remember, we want the pairs of A and B, and we don't want it to be duplicates. So for example, it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So first pair is going to be 1 and 2. And if we increase I by 2, index is going to be 2, right? And then so the next pair is going to be 3 and 4. We don't want 1, 2, 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. That's not what the question is asking. So frequency comes first. That's why it's nums at index I, and value is the next value, right? Or the next number. So we do I plus 1 to get the next number in the index. And after we get our frequency and value, so frequency, value, 1 and 2, we want to push in whatever this value is, value, frequency, whatever this value is, this number of times. So we make another for loop that's going to iterate for the number, whichever frequency is, and that is going to push in the value to our results array. And after we're done with that, we're gonna loop out of this and go back up here and do our for loop again. And then go through our second pair, 3 and 4, and we're gonna go down to our second for loop, and then loop through the whole thing again 4 times, because we have not 4 times, 3 times, because this is our frequency, and we want to push in 4 3 times. So we get 2, 4, 4, and 4.